Taz, honey, how are you doing?
Good. So good to see you again.
I love that top so much. I just have to say, the lipstick, the top, the whole nine, the book in the background. I
I like
am
my
loving
color.
it. I love it. I've always loved you and I have the same kind of flair. Like
Yeah.
I love
Yeah. Well, I was admiring your pink. That's like my favorite color pink,
yeah, I was like,
So,
I knew I was seeing you today. So I wanted to
yeah.
represent.
Awesome.
I want to just get out the gate.
Yeah.
And I know that, both of us we're so grateful to get to work with so many women in the perimenopause transition.
Yeah.
And then also we get to do it too.
Yeah.
And so I would love to know how has your perimenopause journey been? And what were some of the kind of defining moments for you in that journey, not only as a mom, but as a
Yeah.
CEO, as someone who's juggling a lot and who's probably also written a couple books in the transition?
Yes, definitely. So, yeah, I live, breathe, and talk hormones. My last book was The Hormone Shift, which was all about all our different hormone stages and how I really want it to be a conversation that begins super early because I think the more you know at every phase of your life, it makes each transition so much better. But, and that has really been my experience. Like my hormone stuff started in my 20s. I had PCOS, didn't know it, stumbled around, bumbled around, figuring all that out. At the end of the day, that was a big hormone story, right? I had high androgens, a bad thyroid, all those different things. And so from there, once I kind of got better and learned our field and learned all about integrative and holistic and functional medicine and all these things and food is medicine, I was better. Went on to have my two children and got busy as many of us are with running businesses and raising young children and raising a family and all that other stuff. So I knew a lot going in. I probably know more than the average person entering perimenopause, which by the way now we define as anywhere from like 35 all the way to like 52, right? Just this massive time span. And, I felt good for the most part, but there were definitely some changes that were sneaking in that I ignored, like so many women do because I was busy. So everything from like the really heavy periods, like my periods went from being, manageable to being just like, oh my God, am I gonna, stain what I'm wearing today? Or is it okay to sit here? That type of thing, So that was one of my earlier symptoms. I think I didn't realize, and in fact, it's still hitting me right now as I'm looking back at old pictures because I've been so busy and so in my head. Like I think my weight has started to tick up over the last 6 or 7 years or so, and again, I think I just wasn't super aware of it because I can maybe hide it well. But I did step on the scale. I don't like to step on the scale all the time because I even struggled with some eating stuff when I was younger. But I remember stepping on the scale a few times over the last 5 or 6 years and seeing the number higher than what I expected. And now that I have kind of the bandwidth and the time to refocus on myself a little bit, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm looking at these old pictures being like, my weight was actually picking up back then, I think that's one thing that was going on with me. At the same time, there's a lot in this phase that's going on with your life, right? Like
Yes.
you have aging parents. So my mother-in-law got super sick and eventually passed away. My children were starting to have some issues, my daughter in particular, socially. And so we had to deal with that. My husband went through kind of this dark couple of years and like trying to help him navigate his own shifting that was happening. That was kind of scary.
Yeah, I
Everybody has come
remember.
out of all of that,
Yeah.
but it was just a scary time. And so I think, one of the things as I look back and now, like I was just sharing with you, and I don't mind sharing, candidly, like I'm still in perimenopause. I'm probably a little bit closer to menopause because I haven't had a period in a while. Now kind of looking back, it's like that need to really focus on ourselves no matter what's going on, because it's taking just having the bandwidth and taking a second to be like, how am I feeling? What's different? What's changed? What do I need to do about it? And I think this is such a busy phase of life.
Oh
We call it the
gosh. Yeah.
superwoman phase in my book. It's such a busy phase of life that it's very easy for the years to tick by and to not take action and then to have a really bad outcome on the other side of that, whether it's your health and a new diagnosis or a relationship that's blown up or whatever it is, So I think this is a really important phase of life to talk about.
I agree. I mean, obviously, there's some profound shifts that we get to go through as women, and that's a lot in your book, right? Puberty being a
Right.
massive one. I
Yeah.
mean, the level of brain reorganization that happens in puberty is just not recognized enough and
No.
not, not supported enough. So there's
Right.
that. And then if we become moms, postpartum and in pregnancy and postpartum, but postpartum really, whew, massive reorganization there. And then perimenopause. And
Yeah.
I think what makes it a higher stakes game, at least in my experience working with my patients and also just in my own body, is that I am dealing with more than ever before. And what I do now now is really going to dictate how my body is functioning at 50 and 60 and beyond. And I realize I'm like, okay, I get to really pay attention to my body during a time where life isn't really, dictating that.
Right, right. I mean,
You
I
know?
think I read somewhere like it's critical aging year is somewhere around 42 to 44.
Mhm,
That's the real hallmark year when scientists try to pin it down. And then the next one is 60.
mhm.
And I think that 42 to 44 is because the hormones are shifting. I really do feel like that's the primary reason. And with those hormone shifts, it's not just about our reproductive health, it's about all the other things that hormones touch, right? Whether it's how we think, our bone health, our sex drive, our weight, our mood, we could go on forever. So I think, it's really important for all of us to have a game plan for these years and not just kind of bumble around blindly, like thinking we're all crazy and something's wrong with us. So,
Yeah.
I think that's so important.
A deeper question I want to ask as you were sharing a little bit about kind of what was in this transition for you in terms of parents and your husband and just a lot of things that you were navigating at the same time as your body's shifting and changing. How did you navigate bandwidth?
Ooh, that's a good one. Again, we often don't practice what we preach, but I have a lot of bandwidth, so it took a lot to make me realize that my bandwidth was disappearing. And I'm not embarrassed to admit, I never have anxiety. I don't think I've ever had true depression unless it's been situational. But for the first time in my life, I finally understood what patients were telling me when they're telling me about anxiety. I actually felt like I would have everything from heart palpitations to almost like people would describe this and I couldn't get it. Like feeling like you're not in your body. You had that disassociation, right? I was having all of that. And so for me, that was, when I look backwards, I think that was probably one of the things that was so foreign to me, like what is this feeling and why am I feeling like this? And I would hide it. I would try to hide it from everybody. Maybe just those closest to me knew that that was something that was happening. I actually had an episode. I remember there was just too much going on and, we were just juggling things. I had what felt like a heart attack. I had like this crushing pain to my chest. It dissipated. I got checked out. Everything was fine, but it truly felt like something was happening to my heart. It's never happened again since. But I think it's a classic, like my progesterone levels were going down, the stress was going up, I wasn't sleeping because of everything else that was happening around me, and my bandwidth shrunk. Couldn't take it anymore. Cortisol is out of control. So that was sort of a wake up call, of like, okay, we need to nurture a little bit more. Let's get a little bit more serious about taking care of me. So I went back to my regular acupuncture, back to yoga, back to some of those modalities that help me get more bandwidth. And I did, I think, go on some bioidentical progesterone for about a year or so around that time, which is exactly what I had to do back in my 20s when I had that health crisis. So those are things that kind of got me out of it. But that sensation was probably that, and the heaviness of my periods were probably the two most like potent issues that I noticed during those years.
I would say that I'm 44. I'll be 45 in a couple days.
Yeah.
And it was 33 or 43 where I really felt things shift. I was still breastfeeding, but something
Yeah.
shifted. And it was the resilience or the lack thereof. Like
Yeah.
all of a sudden I was up against an edge
Yeah.
that I didn't, and I thought that I hadn't been up against my edge before, but I
Right.
really had to shove it, to
Right.
get up against that edge. And all of a sudden I was just there doing normal things. And I
Yeah.
was like, oh my gosh, I don't have capacity. I
Right.
just all of a sudden, I'll never forget. It was my son's 2.5 birthday week because we do half birthdays with him because his birthday in December. And I could not put this party together.
Oh
Never had a
my
hard time
gosh.
putting a party together. It wasn't even
Yeah.
that many people, but all of a sudden,
Yeah.
like it all felt insurmountable. And I was like, what is happening to me? I
Yeah.
just remember I didn't have capacity for it. And I was like, and I knew, I mean, it was still in my denial phase. I'm like, this can't be perimenopause. It just can't be yet. And but then as it played out for a couple of months, I was like, oh. And so now I find myself up against my edge more than I would love to be. Obviously, I would love to operate in superwoman energy, but I feel like this is my body saying, you know what? Like you
Yeah.
did that for so long. Like,
Yeah.
you don't get to do this
Can't keep
anymore.
doing that. And the great thing about now, like I'm 52, so the great thing about now is I just don't push myself anymore. Like I have a lot of energy and I have a lot of passion and I still feel like there's a lot I'm meant to do in the world and all those other good things. But when my brain is tired at 5 or 6 o'clock and at night or 7 or whenever, before I would like stay up and I'd keep working and I try to push through it, or I stay up late at night and keep doing stuff. Now I'm like, we're done.
Oh,
Time
yeah.
to like do something fun or go take a walk, or, just we're done. This is all I could do today. So that's kind of the wisdom of this, is understanding like where your energy is on a given day and when it's time to like call it and draw the line and move on.
I agree with you. I think I'm already there. I mean, we're moms after
Yeah.
5, let's be
Yeah.
honest, like, or whatever, after when the
Right.
kids are home and you're like laying up. My nanny goes home at 5.
Yeah.
So it's full on, like,
Yeah.
and then that's until Kingston's in bed. It's full tilt, especially at this
Full.
age where
Yep.
it is like bath time routine.
Yeah.
It's a
Yes,
whole
yes,
thing.
yes.
We are
I
running the
know.
gamut. And
Yeah.
so even if I wanted to work, there's no energy, there's no room for it, because he needs full,
Right.
what you doing?
Full
What you got
attention.
over there? What do you,
Right.
he wants my
Yeah.
attention. He's like, what do you,
Yeah.
why is your computer over
Right.
here? And I'm like,
Right.
nope, mom is not doing nothing. I promise.
I
Like,
know. I
and
know.
so it's been such a blessing too, because even if I wanted to work, but then by 8 o'clock, I got him in bed, like, oh, my brain is done. There's nothing to be looked at. Occasionally my husband, who's in our business, will ask me like, he'll be working on a landing page because he's a man. So he's still like, he's younger than me. He's like, hey, can I get your opinion on this? And I'm like, oh, it's a full body no. Like, if you didn't catch me an hour during working hours, don't expect me to look at the headline of this landing page right now. Like, I don't care what it says.
That is so funny. I totally, mine's younger too, but I actually feel like, ironically, again, this goes back to the Eastern concept of energy. Like, my husband's younger, he's about 5 years younger, but like from an energetic standpoint, I still feel like I have more energy than him, even though there's more on my plate. So again, and like, I had a patient say this to me, like, I don't understand how you do everything you do, blah, 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 blah. And I remember stopping her and saying, we're each gifted with a certain amount of energy, and we can replenish that energy or we can waste that energy depending on how we live your life. But the most important thing is to not compare yourself to somebody else, because your energy is your energy and you know what you need to do to replenish it or to build it, all of these different ideas that we talk about in Chinese medicine. So I think a lot of women in this superwoman phase, like, are doing a lot of sort of comparison stuff. Well, like, they're doing 5 activities, so I should do 5 activities, or they're running around town, or, whatever, and then start to feel less than or not so great about themselves. And I would just remind them, like, your energy is your most precious resource. And so if that isn't feeling right for whatever reason, don't compare yourself to a million people around you. Like, dial back and really focus on, why is your energy shifting? What do you need to do about it? And oftentimes is some sort of overlap between your lifestyle, how you're caring for yourself, and then usually something chemically has shifted. And it's important to understand what that shift is.
And I think even more so, definitely not comparing yourself to somebody else, even friends, colleagues, same age, but also I think where I really struggled last year in particular, and still a little bit this year, is I'm comparing myself to who I was even point. 2 years ago, my 2 year ago self, or early 2023 self. So that's where I can get hung up, and I'm like, oh, but I used to be able to, like, and I'm like, I'm never gonna, there's a part of me that feels like I'm never going to be her again. Like, I have, my capacity isn't there. Like, one, I have a child that I'm full energy towards. I'm not her anymore. And so that's been another thing that I'm like, okay, how do I fully surrender to the energy capacity that I have now? Even at least in this, I would say I'm not necessarily early perimenopause, but I'm not late perimenopause. I'm kind of like in the gray middle, and I'm just like, I just have to honor that right now, and just know that I'm holding the vision that this is a season.
And it probably is, because you have a young child at home. I feel like parenting young children is so physically exhausting. I remember being just physically exhausted in that phase of my life, So I think, again, it might just be a season, but I think if anything is persisting, we'll get checked out. Like,
for sure. Absolutely.
Where are your hormones? Where is all this stuff? So that, there's so many answers and there's so many things we can do nowadays. So really getting the help you need, I think, is so important.
Oh, absolutely. And 100%. Looking at labs, looking at hormones, looking at your metabolic health. I was interviewing another friend of mine, and I'm challenging my metabolism today. I'm running a glucose tolerance test, and I have a CGM on, and mind you, ran labs about 3 months ago and everything's dialed, but still I'm having, as I've shared a little bit on with some other interviews, I'm having migraines more persistently than I would love, especially the kind of mama I want to be. Like a functioning mother would be great, And so we were like, is it rebound blood glucose issues? Like, what could it be? And so I'm running I'm actually in the middle of I'm challenging my metabolic system today while I'm doing all these interviews.
Awesome. There we
why
go.
not? Here we go. So I'm actually in the middle of testing literally today. I did a microbiome stool test today. I'm challenging my this, and then I'm doing a blood test, and it's all going and sending in. So it's, you get to like, is there something I'm missing? Is there something that I'm not clear on? So I agree. If something isn't right, it feels a little bit out of the ordinary, even more so than you would have thought perimenopause was going to be. Go checked
out.
Look deeper.
And because progesterone, I don't know if you've ever been on progesterone.
Oh, I'm on 300 milligrams a night.
300? Like, I can't tolerate quite that much, but it is a game changer when it comes to sleep, when it comes to brain fog, when it comes to anxiety, heart palps. That's a game changer. So that's a solution for folks, right?
Oh, for sure.
And in addition to, like, understanding what's happening with your blood sugar, because the other thing, and I talk about this in my book as well, is the other thing that's happening when these hormones shift is that blood sugar is going everywhere, right? It's up, it's down, one glass of alcohol drops it dramatically, then it's spiking way back up again. All of that makes us feel bad, So understanding that, like, what you're eating, like how much protein are you getting in? Are you eating consistently throughout the day? Is your blood sugar nice and stable? Those are all factors, that are playing into the experience of perimenopause that you're having. So, they say perimenopause is like the second puberty. And I kind of agree. It's like all of a sudden everything is like all disrupted again, all stirred up, and you're trying to find what your normal is, and more importantly, what are the things that work for you so that you can curate that right plan for you.
Yeah, with the exception that we're not teenagers anymore and we just have to deal with high school. Like there's little people.
They have a pile of crap.
Yeah, there's people, like not only employees, maybe for some of you, but also little people, or semi almost adults. I always find it really fascinating where a lot of women are in peri and their kids are in puberty at the same time. So we've got two hormone shifts running in tandem, and always just how that's gonna end up playing
Fireworks, for sure.
How much therapy are our kids gonna need? On the back end,
right? I know. It's so funny.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that. I mean, I've been talking a lot about the metabolic changes that happen in perimenopause and progesterone. I mean, like what a game changer. And I've needed progesterone, even I would say in like 39-40. It was when I needed progesterone. And right now I'm playing with higher dosage, particularly for the migraine. So if people are wondering like, oh my gosh, why are you on such high dosage? I am an N of 1. But most people do not need 300 to 400 milligrams of progesterone at night. But we're kind of playing with seeing if that helps my migraine. So that's the reason why I'm playing with higher dosage. When I had my brain injury last summer, I was on 200 to 300 to mitigate brain inflammation. And so I've used progesterone very therapeutically for kind of more neuroinflammatory issues. So that I just wanted to just disclaimer that if someone's like, oh, maybe I should be on 300 milligrams. You are like, have your practitioner work with you about what dosage is right. And a lot of people that's a lot of progesterone. That may be way too much for you to manage. Other hormones that we should be on the lookout during this phase, besides estradiol and progesterone, maybe even testosterone.
I mean, I think it's so important to look at everything from your insulin and cortisol levels to, even looking at your thyroid and trying to see what your thyroid's doing, looking at DHEA, which is an adrenal hormone. I think that's important as well. So everything from thyroid and cortisol hormones, I think those shift and change a lot. We see a lot of Hashimoto's sort of declare itself in sort of the perimenopausal period. So we'll see that. So I'm routinely screening for that. Cortisol is a big one, but cortisol more so in terms of how it's impacting everything else, because as cortisol goes up, blood sugar goes up, insulin goes up, progesterone goes down. So, where is that in the equation when we're trying to curate a treatment plan for sure? I think another one that doesn't get talked about enough, but is probably an important one, especially in the age of Wegovy and Ozempic and all those different things, is leptin, or the leptin hormone, because leptin in turn really regulates what your appetite and your satiety is going to do. And so when your leptin levels are too high, then in turn, you're going to start to gain weight or hold on to weight, essentially, because you stop responding to those feeling full cues. What we'll see metabolically in many is that leptin goes up. As leptin goes up, people are eating more or eating more erratically, maybe due to not sleeping. The next thing you know, there's belly fat, high cholesterol, high A1Cs, this huge shift. Speaking back to my journey too, I've always been sort of super low A1Cs, almost too low cholesterol has been my issue, not high. So I've always been someone trying to get in healthy fats, to nourish my skin and hair and hormones and all these other things. Sure enough, about 3 years ago, my A1C went from it's always been 4.9 to 5. All of a sudden I go to 5.4, which is normal technically,
but not
right?
your normal.
That's not a disease state by any means, but it's not normal for me, who's had a 18-year history almost of staying 4.9 to 5. At the same time, my liver enzymes started to go up. So I, having PCOS was having that classic pattern of higher, blood glucose levels, higher insulin levels, and now having a lot more visceral fat. So my liver enzymes went up too.
Yeah. So you had a little bit of fat, basically fatty liver.
Right?
Yeah.
So these are changes happening and I'm completely unaware. And I would have only caught them by doing labs and really being able to track and understand, well, this is what I look like normally. And now look at the changes. This is exactly what I see in my patients who start to all of a sudden out of nowhere have cholesterol issues, blood pressure issues, all of these different things, which we can now correlate to the drop in estrogen, the drop in progesterone, the drop in testosterone for sure.
Yeah, these are the hidden markers. This is the hidden under the hood concerns or kind of biomarkers that are very much on my radar for women kind of heading into late perimenopause. Maybe it doesn't happen in early perimenopause. It depends on what you're coming in with. If you had PCOS and you didn't manage it and you go into perimenopause, then I may see this at 42, 43, but normally 46 and above is when I start to see these markers go from okay to out of range.
I agree. I 100% agree. And there are stages. You mentioned it a few times, but there are definitely stages to perimenopause. There's definitely early, then there's middle, and there's late. I'm probably in late perimenopause now, right? I probably have another.
Yeah, you're I always call that you're in the waiting room.
Yeah,
right. Totally, you're just
totally. That's me. So I'm close, but that.
But girl, let's not declare it until you're there. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. That middle perimenopause, though, was where the periods were miserable and super heavy. And I think that's where the weight gain started. Early perimenopause, I don't think I was very conscious of. Maybe just a little bit of the anxiety, but not super conscious of that. So again, it's there are these phases and the symptoms start to declare themselves the further along you go in many of these different phases.
Agreed. Well, I think the reason why early can be a little deceptive, I call it sneaky, is that it can feel like the daily pain points of us living life. Just a little bit elevated. All of a sudden your partner chewing, you're like, I don't like how you're doing that anymore. It's just little, we're just a little bit more irritated, just a little bit, a little less resilient, things that were maybe more that you didn't even think twice about. Now you have to think about.
Right.
That's what early perimenopause felt like to me of oh, I could do this with my, eyes covered, hands behind my head, a year ago. And now I have to kind of reverse engineer my day to make sure I've got capacity. That's what and that's that drop in progesterone or the increase in cortisol. I find kind of that tandem of all of a sudden, I don't have the same kind of bandwidth or the same kind of mental energy. All of a sudden I would forget a word or I'd be, and I was like, ooh, what's
happening here?
Yeah, what's happening here? This is a brain shift due to probably a decline in progesterone levels. So, but I think we can easily say, oh, maybe I didn't get enough sleep last night, which yes, and maybe I just pushed myself too hard this week. It can look like, oh, maybe I didn't get enough something.
Yeah, there's a lot of this sort of dusting under the rug of oh, it's just this, or oh, it's just that, or blah, blah, blah. Or some people just hands up, they accept it and they say, I'm just getting old, and I almost cringe as a 52-year-old woman when I hear a 38-year-old woman or a 42-year-old woman tell me she's getting old. I'm like, no, you're not. Stop. You're not getting old.
No, not until 44. Then you fall off. No, then that's the first aging moment. I'm just kidding. No, with that research we talked about at the beginning where these aging spurts happen. That's 44 and 60. I'm kidding.
And I think that's where the noticeable signs are. But we want to turn that around because look, it's 44 and 60. but we're living till 90, 100, and we want to live vitally. So while we have these key markers, sort of lines in the sand or whatever, we know enough nowadays. There's enough science, there's enough research, there's enough, sort of tools and support to make that 44 or even that 60 not a reality for you. And that's hormone balancing, that's, eating and living in a way that's congruent with hormone harmony. And then at 60, the big issue when you hit there is more of, about muscle loss, and the massive loss of muscle further drives the metabolic markers way out of control too.
Yeah.
So, I think, again, if we pull back and, I was reading an article about, it was in a journal, I can't remember the journal right now, but it was arguing about whether or not we doctors should be routinely screening women for iron deficiency, because it's such an issue in so many women, especially in perimenopause.
Oh, for sure. In
And I
peri.
was thinking, I was like, you know what, like our routine screening of women and even men to a certain extent, when they hit this midlife phase, like their late 30s, their 40s, their 50s, it's really a disservice. We don't screen for very much. We screen for heart disease, but only at the extreme, right? We screen for diabetes, but again, only at the extreme level. But we don't have a game plan for folks that say, we're going to check all these different things: iron deficiency, hormone levels, inflammation, nutrient loads, especially of D and B and magnesium and the like, do a cortisol assessment, understand cognitively where they're landing, so that when they hit 60, 70, 80, those years are still productive because we have a plan in place way ahead of time, and that's really looking at your health from, a long spectrum, not just a snapshot of time. But I feel like, again, this phase of life, the superwoman phase of life, the 35 to about 55 phase of life, so important to stay on top of and really get a hold of.
Well, I am so grateful for your book and for your wisdom, because I do believe that age, but we are obviously, like my son, he's growing.
Yeah.
And he's like, mommy's growing too. And I'm like, oh, well, sure, honey. That's what we'll call it, growing. Mommy's growing too. Like, we're all growing. I don't want, that's
Oh
as
my
far as I
God.
went with that.
I
And
know. Translate that.
and but I mean, aging is happening,
Right.
and hormones are shifting. And so I think that they're running parallel lines.
Right.
And so perimenopause, yes, we're aging throughout perimenopause, but it's those declining hormones or the shift in hormones that I think is really playing, it's what's driving a lot of these symptoms. I wouldn't say that it's aging. I think it gets blamed on aging, but we, like you had mentioned, the type of labs, the things, the markers that we need to stay on top of, and the very, very critical hormone markers, cortisol, thyroid, leptin, insulin, like we need to make sure, including our sex hormones too, obviously. Yep. Like that's what we need to be looking at. They are shifting, and that is accelerating things. And so when we're having these conversations, yes, aging is going to be happening over here, but it's these hormone shifts that make me the most, I want more of a radar on that than anything.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's so important to stay on top of them and track yourself. What's your normal? It might be totally different from my normal. So I think that's really important information moving forward.
The other thing I was curious about when it came to, navigating these biomarkers, I'd love from an Eastern perspective, what are some of the other recommendations you're bringing in for women in this time, right? We start to see these levels change. Maybe leptin's changing, insulin's changing, cortisol. I mean, I don't know. Have you seen an optimal cortisol, diurnal cortisol? I have not. I don't,
No.
I've never, I don't.
No.
not in this
super high in the
demographic.
morning and then flip-flopping all day long. No.
So these are things we're seeing. Again, the increase in autoimmunity, low thyroid function, I'm seeing a lot of this play out all at this kind of same time. What are some other things that we maybe we're missing as these shifts are happening that are on your radar in your practice?
Well, one of the things I love about Eastern medicine is, first of all, they do a couple of things that are absolutely fascinating. One is they really play importance and emphasis on gut health. So what's your gut doing through this process? Because if the gut is not healthy and working well, then we know you're not going to metabolize hormones very well. So they'll look for things like, what are you eating? Are you digesting foods well? Are you going to the bathroom consistently every day? What are some of the symptoms? And they'll do like face and tongue diagnosis sometimes to kind of come to that determination. I think the other thing they do really well when we apply their knowledge is really trying to type or biotype people into different categories, to take this broad sort of litany of information that we have and to personalize it even more, right? So they'll divide people, like Ayurvedic medicine divides folks into Vata, Pitta, or Kapha. These are three key types, and we're all sort of combinations of these types or doshas, but then it would get prescriptive. And so if your perimenopause pattern, for example, was for you to be more Vata or more air-like qualities, well, then the prescription for that would be more protein, more healthy fats, more consistent sleep, doing exercises like yoga or walking or being in nature, being more grounded overall. If on the other hand, your perimenopause pattern was shifting you to a kapha state, which was a state that was a little bit more sluggish, a little bit slower, then the plan would be different. You would need constant movement throughout the day. You would actually benefit from eating, at very clear, consistent intervals. You needed a lot of fiber to metabolize the different hormones and the foods that you were getting in, and you would be pulled completely off dairy and sugar, for example, because things like yeast or candida you would be more prone to. So I love applying what we are already learning about hormones and hormone shifts and all that other stuff, but looking at it through the lens of some of these systems of medicine that would even personalize it a little bit further and then give these very prescriptive plans. I think the other thing I loved is that they very much recognize the role of stress and hormone balance, and they talked about it. And they talked about how, when cortisol got super high, it disrupted the entire, hormonal axis. Acupuncture was the answer to that. That's why so many people get pregnant on acupuncture, or things like hot flashes and night sweats go away with that, because you can very gently balance the body's energy system over time and teach it to quiet down. It's essentially what acupuncture is doing. And I think that, they really bring in the importance of your emotional health with all of this, right? They talk a lot about the mind, body, spirit, how it's all connected, and how we need to be thinking about health moving forward, not just as a data point, not just as a hormone, but as an integration of everything going on with you. And so again, one of the analogies I can give is, if you're somebody that's experienced deep loss or trauma or heartache, whether it's a divorce or the loss of a child or a parent or whatever it is, that stuff in women lives in the breast. And so if you're not releasing that, right, the liver meridian, which runs through the breast, gets clogged, and you have this sort of vibration of anger or heartache that kind of stays persistent, that triggers inflammation and then leads to a diagnosis like a breast cancer or something along the lines. So what we learn from them or take from them is a lot of things. First of all, how to personalize the information out there, whether it comes to food or gut or lifestyle or movement, all that other stuff. Secondly, kind of a bigger toolbox of herbal remedies and different types of remedies that help with many of the symptoms. But most importantly, that connection, that interconnectedness between our mind, body, and spirit, and how that's influencing your lab work, your hormones, and so much more.
I love that. That's so powerful. I remember when I was planning to get pregnant, acupuncture was a big part of my toolbox.
Yeah.
And progesterone. It was a yes and,
know.
right?
That's the magic. That's the acupuncture plus progesterone equals baby.
Exactly.
So like that's
even
math
at
we can
41.
do.
Yeah. And so that was very much my formula at the time. So I really I resonated with that so deeply. But I mean, you brought up aspects that I think are, like I said, it's one thing to look at the levels, it's one thing to look at the biomarkers, but then all of these other pieces, the emotional body, the mind body connection, those are all playing out as well. And I think sometimes we ignore those or we don't realize how much they're affecting us.
Right. Very much so. And I think it's important to pay attention to that. People talk a lot about perimenopause and menopause with just like hormone remedies, but I always say you're going to need more and more hormone, and more aggressive remedies if we don't get this other part right. This other part is your foundation. So when you do the work for all these other things, diet, mind, spirit, sleep, all this other stuff, you may still need hormones. You may just not need a whopping amount of hormones, which at the end of the day serves us well, right? Because we don't want to deal with the side effects and some of the other things that come about when we're on, really high doses of hormones, for example.
I hear you. It's interesting. Yeah. The whole aspect of supplementing hormones, replacing hormones, is it more of a band-aid for some of the other things we haven't dealt with, or is it, that they're helping to protect us? I think it's like this fine balance between the two. And how does that play out for you guys at your practice? Like, some of these pieces that you're talking about, the emotional piece, the stress, I always liken them to being very insidious, because it can be so hard to kind of wrangle those, get those under control. I know for me, that's been my biggest, deepest journey.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the practice, we see ourselves as sort of just a collaborative partner in this whole journey. The beauty of the practice is so much fun. To this day, I enjoy the work, but we'll do a lot of scanning. We'll do an emotional scan using certain technology that we have. We'll do a Chinese meridian scan. We will do the lab work, a full history and physical. We'll do a musculoskeletal evaluation. And when you put all of that together, you can sort of equip people with, okay, emotionally, this is where you are. From a Chinese medicine meridian standpoint, this is where you are. From an Ayurvedic standpoint, this is where you've landed, and here is where the rest of the laboratory data, what it's saying. And oftentimes you can paint a picture for somebody. You can put a puzzle piece together. And that's incredibly, enlightening for somebody who, just like we've talked about, not being aware and we're in this field, for people who are not in this field day in and day out, it can be light bulbs and they can be like, oh my gosh, I need to change X, Y, and Z, or I need to take this, or whatever it is. But it brings the picture together for them. So they don't feel like they're just grabbing for information that's generic or that everybody's doing or, every doctor's doing too. So it just helps to really narrow that field for them for sure.
Well, one of the things I highly appreciate in this conversation is that you're looking at that aspect.
Yeah.
That's something that's missed. It's because you're usually going somewhere else for that. If you're willing to do the work there, that deeper work of kind of finding, why am I even driven like this? Why are these patterns playing out? Why is it my cortisol is constantly elevated? Like what is the root cause around that? And, I think unless we can address that, we may, you could throw all the hormones and all the things at this all day long, and this person's still going to be operating at that level. Dr. Taz, honey, where can we find you? Where is the best place to come and get you?
I am everywhere on social media. So you can check out my Instagram, Dr. Taz, it's DRTAZMD. I'm on TikTok. I'm on YouTube. Come to my website. I have a lot of great guides there. It's drtaz.com. And we've got our hormone guides there. We've got cookbooks, anti-inflammatory meal plans, all kinds of goodies up there on the website if you want to check it out. And you can come to my clinics if you want to be a patient. It's Center Spring MD, but all the information is right there on the website and social handles. So lots of resources for everybody, for sure.
Oh my goodness, no doubt. And then yes, and go and get the book too, The Hormone Shift. I love it. I love your book. It's amazing. And that's a great starting point too. I mean, not only obviously you've got amazing resources. I love your Instagram page, but like that book really does such a great job of laying things out. And so if you're really looking for that comprehensive kind of approach, that would be the place I recommend.
Thank you. Well, thank you for your support with the book too, for sure. But really, I wanted that to be a handbook for all women, no matter how old you were, whether you had a teenage daughter like me, and someone's like, what do I do about my hormones? You could literally just hand them that book and hopefully they would get their answers.
I agree. All right. Thank you, honey.
Thank you. Good to see you. Big hugs.
Thank you so much for watching. Now, if you found this video helpful, give it a thumbs up and share your thoughts in the comments. And if you are ready to learn more about perimenopause and how to navigate with a lot of ease and grace, be sure to subscribe to this channel so that you can join our community. Don't forget to share this video with someone that you love, that you know is navigating the perimenopause journey as well, because they deserve to feel their best too. See you in the next video.